Hello. How is everyone tonight? Hi. Hello. Let a few more people get on here and we'll get started. This is our last reading of Superfudge. Our last night to read Superfudge. We've got the last two chapters, 11 and 12, to read. And we will be finished. And then I'll put a poll up on our Facebook page and you guys can vote for a brand new book for next week to read. How about that? We'll have a new adventure next week. I still haven't picked out which two yet. I'll have to do that, and I'll probably post that on our Facebook page tomorrow sometime and let the poll go through usually Monday morning or afternoon. I'll probably let it go for about 48 hours. So everyone watch for that and cast your vote to help decide what we're going to read next week. All right, guys, welcome again to our last night of virtual story time for this week. We are going to finish up Superfudge from Judy Blume. We're going to read the last two chapters, 11 and 12 tonight. So here we go. Chapter 11 is called Catastrophes. Dad stopped talking about his book. I had a feeling it wasn't going very well. Instead, he talked about growing vegetables and how to cook them Chinese style, or about the Princeton University hockey team. He took me to all their games. When Jimmy Fargo came to visit, he joined us. I'm really into violence, Jimmy said. I think hockey's a great game. It's a lot bloodier than football, and there are more team fights. That's not what hockey is all about, Dad argued. It's a game of skill, of timing, of precision. Yeah, sure, Jimmy said. I know all about that, but it's still great to see the blood bounce on the ice. Blood bounces on ice? I asked. Yeah, Jimmy said, and so does vomit. See, it has to do with the temperature of the ice versus the temperature of the body, and... Jimmy, please, Dad said, turning green. It's true, Mr. Hatcher. They both bounce on ice. Maybe so, Dad said, but that's not the reason we go to the games. I know, Jimmy said, but it's a nice side event. Dad shook his head and began to check off players' names on the list inside the program. Jimmy leaned across me and tapped Dad's arm. I'm not a violent person, Mr. Hatcher. Don't get the wrong idea. It's a healthy way for me to use up some of my aggressive energy. Hey, Jimmy, I said. Yeah? Shut up. Okay, sure, Jimmy said, and he was quiet until nearly the end of the third period, when 4 of the players got into a fight. Then he stood up and yelled, Kill! Kill! I tugged at his sweater until he sat down again. Later, when I was in bed and Jimmy was in the sleeping bag, he said, I've been seeing the school psychologist twice a week. She says I have a lot of anger because of my parents splitting up. Take my word for it, Peter. Divorce is a catastrophe. You should watch your parents all the time and listen to every word they say so they can't ever take you by surprise. For the next couple of weeks, I paid close attention to my parents, looking for possible signs of divorce. But I didn't see or hear anything unusual, and soon I got tired of watching and listening. Besides, whenever my parents fight, they wind up laughing. In February, we celebrated Tootsie's first birthday. She carried on a family tradition of smashing her fist into her cake. Grandma, who believes in handing out gifts to everyone, not just the birthday person, bought me a 4-color ballpoint pen and Fudge a brand new Brian Tumpkin book. Read, Fudge told Grandma. She took him on her lap and read him the latest story about Uriah, one of Brian Tumpkin's characters. I used to really like his books when I was a little kid, I said. I'm not a little kid, Fudge reminded me. Next year I'll be in 1st grade. You want to see a little kid? Look at the birthday girl. The birthday girl was sitting in her high chair making a mess. Grandma had bought her a new baby-proof cup, one that refused to turn over no matter how hard Tootsie tried. Finally, Tootsie screeched, picked up the cup, and dumped her milk over her head. Tootsie's first birthday party could go down as a real catastrophe, I said. "What's a catastrophe?" Fudge asked. "It's when something goes wrong," I said. "Or when everything goes wrong," Mom added. Talk about catastrophes. 6 weeks later, Tootsie learned to walk. At first it was just a few feet at a time, from Mom to Dad, or from me to Fudge. But pretty soon, she was toddling all over the place. Sometimes she'd crash land, and if no one was watching, she'd laugh and start all over again. But if she caught one of us looking at her, she'd start bawling and wouldn't stop until she got an arrowroot cookie. And Tootsie wasn't the only one crash landing. Fudge was learning to ride his bicycle. One of his major problems was stopping. Instead of using his brakes, he kept trying to jump off while his bike was still going. I was wrong when I told him he might get a couple of scraped knees. Elbows, knees, a head, or more like it. Constantly. But he refused to give up. He was really determined to ride to school. Finally, toward the end of April, Mom and Dad decided that Fudge had mastered the art of bike riding well enough to ride to school with Daniel, who had learned in his front yard, just the way he said he would, without a bruise or a scrape anywhere. And it would have turned out okay if only Fudge had remembered to use his brakes when he got to the bike rack at school. But he didn't. So he crashed into the rack, knocking down a pile of bikes, and he wound up with scraped elbows, scraped knees, and torn jeans. "Don't tell Mommy," Fudge said, "or she'll never let me ride to school again." "I think Mommy's going to notice anyway," I said. "You're a mess." I carried him into the nurse's room. Miss Elliott washed off his cuts and bruises with peroxide, and when she did, Fudge let out a howl. Not that I blamed him. I could practically feel the sting myself. But Fudge didn't stop with one howl. He kept up, making such a racket that Mr. Green, the principal, heard him and came running down the hall. "What's going on in here?" Mr. Green said. "Scraped knees and elbows," Miss Elliott said. "Scraped knees and elbows," Mr. Green repeated. "When I was a boy, I had scraped knees and elbows all the time. Used to roller skate and fall down week after week." Fudge sniffled and said, "Too bad you weren't any good at it." "Who says I wasn't any good at it?" Mr. Green asked. "You just said you were always falling down," Fudge said. "That's because I took a lot of chances," Mr. Green said. "Now, I want you to hurry back to your classroom because we're having a surprise visitor in a little while." "Who is it?" Fudge asked. "It's a very famous man, someone who writes and illustrates children's books. His name is Brian Tumpkin." "Brian Tumpkin is alive?" Fudge asked. "Alive and well and on his way to our school." "Brian Tumpkin is alive!" Fudge said again. "I never knew that. Did you know that, Peter?" "I never thought about it," I said. Mr. Green faced Miss Elliott and said, "Lucky for all of us that he's agreed to do a program for our girls and boys." "I'm afraid I don't know who he is," Miss Elliott said. "Well then, you must be dumber than I thought," Fudge told her. "First, you put peroxide on my cuts without blowing to take away the sting, and now you don't know who Brian Tumpkin is." "I never blow on cuts," Miss Elliott said. "You can spread germs that way." "Mommy always blows when she puts on peroxide." "Yes, well," Mr. Green said, "let's get back to the classroom now. It's almost time for our special program." At 10 o'clock, we all filed into the auditorium. Then Mrs. Morgan, the librarian, introduced Brian Tumpkin, telling us that millions of kids have read and loved his books, and how lucky we were that he was able to make a last-minute stop at our school. Brian Tumpkin walked on stage. He was tall, with gray hair and a gray beard. He waved to us. Then he turned and beckoned to someone backstage. "I brought a friend with me," he said. "Come on, Uriah. Hurry up. The boys and girls are waiting for you." Nobody came out on stage, but Brian Tumpkin pretended that Uriah had. He pretended to be holding Uriah's hand, and he kept talking to him as if he were really there. I thought, either this guy is a real wacko, or he's a great actor. Finally, he looked out at the audience and asked if any of us saw Uriah. Someone down front called out, "I see him!" I didn't even have to look. I knew who that voice belonged to. "You see," Brian Tumpkin told the rest of us, "one of you can see Uriah. Come up here, young man." The next thing I knew, Fudge was on stage. I slid down in my seat. What's your name, young man? Fudge. That's an unusual name, Brian Tumpkin said. I know it, Fudge said. How would you feel about helping me out today, Fudge? It's a real privilege, Fudge said. I couldn't believe it. He'd finally learned how to use the word. You could see that Brian Tumpkin was impressed. He said, Well, it's a real privilege for me, too. That makes it unanimous, Fudge said. My, you certainly have an impressive vocabulary, Brian Tumpkin said. I learn a lot of words at home. That's wonderful. Some of them I'm not allowed to say in school. Some of them my bird can say. His name is Uncle Feather. I slid down, lower in my seat. What grade are you in, Fudge? Brian Tumpkin asked. Kindergarten. Who is your teacher? I started out in Ratface's class, but now I'm in Miss Ziff's class. She's a lot nicer than Ratface. I covered my face with my hands. Let's get on with our chalk talk now, shall we? Brian Tumpkin said. What's a chalk talk? Fudge asked. I'm going to sit down at my easel, Brian Tumpkin said, walking across the stage, and you are going to describe a person to me. And I'm going to draw the person you describe. Do you think you can do that? Yes, Fudge said. It's a man. Oh, well, I'll need more help than that, Brian Tumpkin said, picking up a piece of chalk. Is he tall or short? He's tall, Fudge said, and he's got a fat belly that hangs over his pants, and he's mostly bald, but he's got some hair around the edges. And he wears glasses, and he's got a pointy nose and a mustache that curls down around his mouth. Brian Tumpkin was drawing as fast as Fudge was talking. And he's got a crooked front tooth, and his feet are very long, and he walks like this, Fudge said, giving us a demonstration. Like a duck? Brian Tumpkin asked. Yes, Fudge said. All of a sudden, I knew who Fudge was describing, and I wanted to get out of the auditorium as fast as I could. But then Fudge looked out at the audience and called, Where are you, Peter? I can't see you. And I knew I couldn't get up without having everybody look at me. So I slouched down as low as I could and didn't answer. Peter, can you see me? I let out a groan. Joanne, who was sitting behind me, giggled. I can't find my brother, Fudge told Brian Tumpkin. You'll find him later, Brian Tumpkin said. Now, you haven't told me what this man is wearing. Oh, Fudge said, he's wearing a blue shirt and a tie with stripes and brown pants and brown socks and brown shoes with brown shoelaces. Brown shoelaces, Brian Tumpkin repeated. Okay, there we are. He brushed off his hands and held up the picture. Does he look like anyone you know, Fudge? Yes, Fudge said. Who? Mr. Green, Fudge said. The audience laughed. Brian Tumpkin smiled. Who is Mr. Green? The principal, Fudge said. Now the audience roared. Oh dear, Brian Tumpkin said. Oh my. He put his hand to his mouth, and you could see that he was trying hard not to laugh. Mr. Green went up on the stage, then introduced himself to Brian Tumpkin. They shook hands. Mr. Green said, I think that's a wonderful drawing, and I'd like to have it for my office. Would you sign it for me? Certainly, Brian Tumpkin said. I'm very glad you like it. He signed his name across the drawing and handed it to Mr. Green. Everyone clapped. Then Fudge said, Mr. Green, was this a catastrophe? And Mr. Green laughed and said, Not quite, Fudge, but I'm sure you'll try harder next time. I was sure too. All right, Chapter 12. Tootsie Speaks Out. One morning in May, Fudge woke me. Hurry up, he said. You're going to be late for school. Go away, I mumbled. But he pulled off my blanket and shook me. You're really going to be late for school. I looked at my clock radio. 10 after 8. How come my alarm didn't go off? I wondered. As I jumped up out of bed, I raced into the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, threw on some clothes, and headed downstairs. It was quiet in the kitchen. Where is everyone? I asked. Ha ha, Fudge sang, jumping up and down. Ha ha ha, it's Saturday. I really fooled you, didn't I? You little... But he was out the back door and running before I could get my hands on him. I clunked back upstairs and got into bed. I'm going to kill that kid, I told myself. I'm going to tear him into little pieces. I'm going to... I tossed and turned, but it was no use. I couldn't get back to sleep. I heard Tootsie babbling. I got up and walked down the hall to her room. She was sitting up in her crib, flinging out toys one at a time. She stood up when she saw me and held out her arms. I lifted her out of the crib. Yuck, I said. You're smelly. I set her down on the changing table and changed her diaper. Yuck, I said again. The worst thing about babies is diapers. I cleaned her up and dumped plenty of baby powder on her backside. Yuck, Tootsie said. That's right, I told her. Yuck. I carried her down to the kitchen, put her in her high chair, and gave her a bowl of dry cereal to nibble. Fudge peeked in the back door. As soon as he saw me, he took off again, but this time I chased him. When I caught him, I turned him upside down, tossed him over my shoulder, and carried him back to the house. I'll scream, he said. You do, and you're dead, I told him. If you hurt me, I'll tell, he said. Go ahead and tell. I kicked open the kitchen door. When Tootsie saw Fudge upside down, she clapped her hands and laughed. By then, Fudge's face had turned dark red. Put me down! Put me down! Fudge cried. Never, I said. It was just a joke, he whined. Can't you even take a joke? Some joke. Fudge kicked and hollered. Put me down! Say please, I told him. Please? Please what? I asked. Please put me down. Say you'll never wake me up on a Saturday morning again. I'll never wake you up on a Saturday morning again. Or a Sunday, I added. Or a Sunday, he repeated. Or a holiday, I said. Or a holiday. Tell me how sorry you are that you did it today, I said. I'm sorry. How sorry? Very sorry. Very, very sorry, I asked. Yes, very, very, very sorry. I stood him up and watched as the blood drained from his face and his color changed from bright purple to flesh. Ha ha, he said, wriggling away from me. I had my fingers crossed behind my back the whole time, so ha ha ha. None of what I just said is true. He dashed out the back door again. I shook my head. Yuck, Tootsie said, and then she tossed her bowl of dry cereal on the floor. How come you're up so early, Peter? Mom asked an hour later, as she pulled her robe around her and yawned. It's a long story, I said. Well, it certainly is a beautiful day. No point in wasting it. She poured a cup of milk for Tootsie. Where's Fudgy? Outside with Turtle, I said. He's such an early bird, Mom said. The early bird catches the worm. Mom nodded and made herself a cup of coffee. I went over to Alex's house. Let's do something exciting today, I said. Like what? Alex asked. That's the problem, I said. I don't know. We could dig for worms for Mrs. Mulder, Alex suggested. No, it's too early for worms. I told her the fattest ones aren't ready until late summer. Well then, what? We have to think, I said. We sat down on the sofa watching stupid Saturday morning cartoons for the next hour. I got an idea in the middle of Spider-Man. How about a picnic? I said. It's a perfect day for a picnic. Where would we have it? Alex asked. I don't know. Alex scratched his head. What about the lake? We could watch the university crew rowing while we have lunch. Yeah, that's a good idea, I said. What have you got to eat? Probably nothing, Alex said. We both went into the kitchen. My mother shops on Saturday afternoons. He opened the refrigerator. I was right, he said, slamming the door. Nothing. My father shops on Fridays, I said. Let's go see what we have. At my house, we found cold chicken, tomatoes, rye bread, fresh fruits, and frozen lemonade. Great, Alex said. Let's pack up. I went to work making sandwiches while Alex fixed a thermos of lemonade. Don't forget the salt, Alex said. Right, and the mayonnaise, I added. Can't bring mayonnaise on a picnic, Alex said. Why not? It's too gooey, and besides, it can make you sick. Says who? My mother once got food poisoning from eating potato salad on a camping trip, Alex said. But we're not taking potato salad. But it was the mayonnaise in the potato salad that did it, Alex said. But we're not going camping, I argued. We're just going to the lake. I don't want any mayonnaise on my food, Alex said. None. Okay, fine, I told him. And I spread mayonnaise on my 2 pieces of bread. And don't forget the salt. I took the salt shaker out of my lunch bag, held it up, and just to make my point, sprinkled some of it onto Alex's head. Very funny, he said, shaking it off. The screen door slammed. It was Fudge and Turtle. Turtle dove into his water dish and started slurping. Fudge looked around. "What are you doing?" "What does it look like we're doing?" I said. "Making lunch," Fudge said. "That's right. We're going on a picnic." "We are?" Fudge asked. "Not we," I told him. "Us. Me and Alex." "Where are you going for a picnic?" "The lake." "I'll come too." "No, you won't," I said. "Why not?" he asked. "Because you're not invited, that's why." "But I like picnics, and I like the lake." "Too bad." "And I said I was sorry, remember?" "Yeah," I said, "and you also told me you had your fingers crossed behind your back. So everything you said was a lie." "That was a joke," Fudge said. "I really didn't have them crossed. You know what happens to kids who lie?" I asked. "No, what?" "You'll find out." I shoved him out of my way. He ran back, calling, "Mommy, Mommy, please, can I go to the lake with PETA?" "No," Mom said. "Why not?" "Because it's too far. There's a lot of traffic on that road." Fudge stomped his feet and yelled, "I want to go to the lake. I want to go on a picnic too." When he saw us come outside with our lunch bags, he raced toward me and attached himself to my leg. "Take me, take me, take me," he begged. "Get lost," I said, kicking my leg free. "Call Daniel, count ladybugs, do something." Fudge covered his ears with his hands, opened his mouth, and screamed. "He's going to wind up with a sore throat," Alex said. "Come on," I said. "Let's get out of here." We hopped on our bikes and coasted down the driveway. Fudge picked up a couple of rocks and hurled them at us, but he missed. We could still hear him screaming 2 blocks away. Alex had to be home for his piano lessons at 3:30, and by then we'd seen enough of the crew rowing and more than enough of the bugs down by the lake. Mom and Dad were working in the garden when I rode into the driveway, and Tootsie was asleep in a lounge chair. "Did you have a nice picnic?" Mom asked. "It was fun," I said. "A lot of ants, but fun." "Don't forget to rinse the thermos," Dad said. "I won't," I said. "Where's Fudge?" "We haven't seen him since you left," Dad said. "He's probably at Daniel's," Mom said. "He was very angry. I noticed." At 4, the phone rang. I answered. It was Daniel's mother. She asked me to tell Daniel it was time to go home. "He's not here," I said. "Then where is he?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. "Wait a minute." I put down the phone, went to the back door, and called. "It's Mrs. Manham. She's looking for Daniel." Mom ran into the house, wiping her hands on her jeans. She picked up the phone. "Mrs. Manham, we thought Fudge was at your house." "No, not since 11:30 or so." "You found what?" "Oh, no. You don't suppose—" "Yes, of course, right away." She hung up the phone. "What is it?" Dad asked. He was standing at the door listening. "She found Daniel's piggy bank. Smashed. All the money is gone." Mom zipped upstairs to Fudge's room. Dad and I followed. "Bonjour," Uncle Feather said. "Where does he keep that bank Grandma gave him for his birthday?" Mom asked, ignoring Uncle Feather. "Here it is," I said, finding it on his shelf. "And it's empty." "Bonjour, stupid," Uncle Feather said. "Oh, shut up," I told him. "Shut up yourself, yourself, yourself." "How much do you think he had in there?" Mom asked. "About $2.50, I said. "He was counting it the other night." "So between them they had close to $7, Mom said. "7, Uncle Feather repeated. "7, 7, 7. "They can't go far on $7, I said. "Peter, please," Mom said. A few minutes later, Mrs. Manham pulled up in a red sports car. She was wearing cutoffs, a t-shirt that said "Ski the Bumps," and sneakers with the toes cut out. Her hair was in one of those long braids that hung down her back. "We think they might have gone down to the lake," Dad told her. "The lake?" Mrs. Manham said. "Oh, God, Daniel can't swim. Neither can Fudge," Mom said. "Yes, he can," I told her. "He can doggy paddle." "Peter, please." "Anyway, why would they go swimming in the lake?" I asked. "It's too gloppy for swimming." "Peter, please," Dad said. "Please be quiet. We're thinking." "Let's not waste any more time," Mrs. Manham said. "The sooner we start looking for them, the sooner we might find them." "Warren," Mom said, "you go with Mrs. Manham. I'll stay here with Peter, just in case they try to phone us." When they'd left, Mom asked me to bring Tootsie inside. She was still sound asleep in the lounge chair. I picked her up and carried her in the house. She opened her eyes, and when she saw it was me, she smiled and said, "Yuck." At 5, the phone rang. This is it, I thought. It's all over. They found him, splattered across the road, his bike a mangled mess. Or maybe the Princeton crew had found him. Maybe they've dragged him out of the lake, his face blue and swollen. I felt a lump in the back of my throat. If only I'd let him come on the picnic with me, none of this would have happened. If only I hadn't wanted to kill him when he woke me up this morning. Now it was too late. I pictured the funeral, Fudge and Daniel, side by side, in small white coffins. "Peter, would you get the phone?" Mom said. I picked up the receiver. "Hello?" I almost couldn't get the word out. How was I going to tell Mom if it was bad news? "Hi, Peter." Fudge, where are you?" "Guess." "The train station?" "Nope." "The bus station?" "Nope." "The police station?" "Nope." "Do you give up?" "Yes." "Where are you?" "At Sandy's Bakery." "What?" "Sandy's Bakery." "Down by the highway?" "Yes." "You rode all the way to the highway." "It was easy." "Is Daniel with you?" "Yes." Mom grabbed the phone out of my hand. "Fudgy, my angel, I'm so glad you're all right. We've been so worried. Don't move, not an inch. We'll be right down to get you." We jumped into the car. I arranged Tootsie in her car seat, and we took off. We found Dad and Mrs. Manham driving around by the lake. I told them the good news, and they followed us all the way to the traffic circle and the highway. Fudge and Daniel were standing outside the bakery. They looked very small. Fudge was holding a paper bag with Sandy's printed on it. Mom parked, jumped out of the car, and hugged Fudge. "I'm so glad to see you." I felt another, different kind of lump in my throat this time. "Be careful, Mommy," Fudge said. "You'll squish your brownies." When we got back to our house, Fudge settled into Mom's favorite chair and said, "We went to the deli next to Sandy's for lunch. We shared a pastrami sandwich. We each had 3 pickles," Daniel added, relaxing in Dad's chair, "and a cream soda." Mom and Dad and Mrs. Manham sat in a row on the sofa, facing the runaways. "You know that what you did today was wrong," Mom began. "It was inconsiderate and foolish," Dad said. "Not to mention dangerous," Mom added. "And stupid," I said. "And while we're very glad to see you," said Mrs. Manham, "we're also very angry." "Very," Mom said. "And you'll have to be punished," Dad said. Fudge and Daniel looked at each other. "What do you suggest?" Dad asked them. "Put us to bed at 8 o'clock tonight," Fudge said. "That doesn't seem appropriate," Mom said. 7 o'clock? Daniel asked, yawning. "Yes," Mrs. Manham told him, "because you're tired, but that's not a suitable punishment." "Why don't you take away their bicycles for a month?" I suggested, expecting everyone to shout, "Peter, please." But suddenly, the room was very quiet. "No!" Fudge shouted. "Not fair!" Daniel hollered. Mom and Dad and Mrs. Manham exchanged looks. "I think that makes a lot of sense," Dad finally said. "I think so too," Mrs. Manham said. "I agree," Mom said. I couldn't believe it. They'd finally taken me seriously. "But how will we get to school?" Fudge asked, pouting. "You'll walk," Mom told him, "the way you did before you had bicycles." "But Mommy," Fudge began, "if you love me." "It's because I love you," Mom said. "It's because we all love you and care about you." Fudge stood up and stomped his feet. "I'm sorry I bought you any brownies." Dad took their bicycles, chained them together, and set them on the shelf in the garage. "I hope you both learn that you can't run away every time something happens that you don't like." "Running away doesn't solve anything," Mom said. "We had a good time," Daniel said, "so ha-ha." "And a good lunch," Fudge said. "And we showed you we are old enough to ride a bike to the lake. So there." "Oh, no, you didn't," Dad said. "You showed us you aren't ready for the privilege of riding your bicycle." Fudge and Daniel looked at each other again, and this time they both started crying. We ordered pizza for supper. Daniel stopped crying long enough to remind Mom, "I don't eat anything with peas or onions." "How could I forget?" Mom said. After Daniel and Mrs. Manham had gone home, Mom put her new Mozart record on the stereo, and we sat around the living room working on our family picture puzzle. It's a mountain scene at sunset, and so far we've only got one corner of it put together. Peter ran away from home one time, Fudge said, chewing on a piece of puzzle. I took it away from him and said, I thought about running away, but I never went through with it. I found a matching piece and snapped it into place. And Daddy ran away when he didn't want to work anymore, Fudge said, stacking up the orange pieces. What are you talking about? Dad asked. That's why we moved to Princeton, isn't it? Fudge said. No, of course not, Dad told him. Whatever gave you that idea? I figured it out myself, Fudge said. Well, that's just not true, Dad said. Then why did we come to Princeton? Fudge asked. For a change, Dad explained. That's why I wanted to go to the lake, Fudge said, for a change. Speaking of Princeton and changes, Mom said, polishing off her third brownie, Millie and George will be back soon, and we have to decide what to do. What do you mean? I said. Well, either we have to find a house here, or we have to get ready to move back to the city. You mean we have a choice? I asked. I always thought we were living in Princeton for the year, and that was it. Tootsie toddled over, reached up, and grabbed a handful of sunset pieces and ran away with them. Hey, come back here with those, I said, chasing her across the room. I handed her a rubber mouse, and she dropped the puzzle pieces. I'm not crazy about the idea of commuting, Dad said, but if the rest of you want to stay in Princeton, I'll do it. Commuting? I asked. Yes, Dad said. I'm going back to work at the agency. No more writing? I asked. Not for now, Dad said. I've found out I'm not very good at it. I may never finish the book. I knew he wouldn't, but I didn't say so. I'm very good at advertising, though, Dad continued, and I'm anxious to get back to work. He looked at me. But that doesn't mean that I want to be president of the agency, Peter. I know, I said. What about you, Mom? What are you going to do? Well, with Daddy going back to work at the agency, I'd really like to get started on my art history classes. Maybe at NYU. That's in the city, isn't it? Yes, Mom said, in Greenwich Village. So you both want to go back to the city? I asked. They touched hands, and Mom said, I guess we do. What about you, Peter? Asked Dad. What do you want to do? I don't know, I said. I'm used to it here, but I still miss New York. I don't remember New York, Fudge said. Of course you do, I told him. No, I don't, he said. Can I ride my bike there? In some places, I said, like Central Park. I remember Central Park, Fudge said. And you remember our apartment, I told him, and the elevator, and Henry. Oh, that's right, I forgot about Henry and the elevator. Mom and Dad laughed. What about you, Tootsie? Fudge said. Where do you want to live, Princeton or New York? Yuck, Tootsie said. Did you hear that? Fudge asked. Yuck, Tootsie said again. Mom and Dad exchanged surprised looks. That's Tootsie's first word, Fudge said. She wants to live in New York, too. New yuck, Tootsie said. I realized that I was the only one that knew Tootsie had been saying yuck all day, and I wasn't about to tell them that it had nothing to do with the city. That makes it unanimous, Fudge said. What a big word, Mom said. I know lots of big words, Fudge told her. You'd be surprised at how many big words I know. Fudgy, Mom said, you're just full of surprises. So we're going back, I thought. Back to the Big Apple. Back to our apartment. Back to Jimmy Fargo and Sheila Tubman and my rock in the park. Back to Walking Turtle and back to the Pooper Scooper. But it's worth it. It's all worth it. I picked up Tootsie and swung her around. I couldn't help laughing, and Tootsie laughed too. To some people, there's no place like New Yuck, and I guess I'm one of them. All right, guys, that's the end of our book for this week. And again, we were reading Superfudge by Judy Blume. So I'm so glad you guys were able to join me this week, and I hope you enjoyed the book. And watch our Facebook page for our our poll I'll put up this weekend, tomorrow sometime, for 2 new choices for what we're going to read next week. You guys get to decide which book we'll read, okay? All right, guys. So have a great weekend, and I will see you guys Monday evening for our new adventure, okay? All right. Bye, guys. Again, have a great weekend. Bye.